One woman, one coffin. This story is just evil.
When at 20 years old, Colleen accepted a ride from a couple with a baby. That ride turned into a decade of torture, slavery, and terror.
There were many times I thought I was going to die.
65 centimeters high, 60 centimeters wide. Those are the average dimensions of a coffin. Even if you don't suffer from claustrophobia, you can probably imagine how tight it must feel inside. But since most of us will only ever lie in a coffin after we're already dead, it's something we don't really have to worry about. For Colleen Stan, though, it was very different. Her kidnapping is one of the most shocking abduction cases of the last few decades. This young woman was forced to spend 23 hours a day in a coffin for years. How that happened is what we'll cover in today's video. Colleen Stan is the name of a young woman from Oregon. Due to the cruelty of the crime and the intense media attention, the name is a pseudonym, used to protect Colleen's privacy. Years later, Colleen agreed to speak publicly about her case in the American TV show Snapped. Still, she didn't want too many details about her private life going public. That's why I'll limit the information about her to what is officially known and confirmed by her. Colleen Stan was born on December 31, 1956 in Eugene, Oregon. She had a good relationship with her parents. Her childhood and teenage years were uneventful. She was a lively kid and quickly made friends. In May 1997, when Colleen was just 20 years old, she wanted to surprise a friend. That friend had a birthday coming up and was planning a big party. But she lived in Northern California, more than 1,000 kilometers away from Colleen. Since Colleen didn't own a car, she had originally told her friend she couldn't come. But then she got an idea. She would hitchhike all the way there and surprise her friend. To make sure she arrived on time, she started her trip on May 19th. This gave her a few extra days, just in case she couldn't catch a ride right away and needed to stop and rest. But it worked. Within a short time, Colleen made it to Red Bluff in California. From there, it was only about 225 kilometers to her friend's place. It was May 19, 1977, a mild and calm morning. By that point, Colleen had already turned down several drivers who had offered her a ride. The 20-year-old was being very cautious. She didn't want to get into a car with anyone who seemed sketchy or potentially dangerous. So she was relieved when a young couple pulled up in a blue car. There was even an 8-month-old baby in the back seat. Colleen felt she could trust them and got in with a good feeling. Most of us would probably do the same, assume a young family is especially trustworthy. But this family was different. During the ride, Colleen noticed the driver was repeatedly watching her through the rearview mirror. At first, she didn't think much of it, but her gut told her something wasn't right. A little later, the couple stopped at a gas station. Colleen used the chance to go to the restroom. According to her own account, she suddenly had the urge to climb out the window and run. But she didn't have any clear reason to. The couple had been friendly so far, so she pushed the thought away and got back in the car. But now, suddenly, there was a strange wooden box on the seat next to her, one that hadn't been there before. Colleen tried to calm herself and ignore it. The young father started the car again and pulled back onto the highway. But just a few minutes later, without saying a word, he took the next exit and stopped near a river. Colleen had no time to react. Seconds later, a knife was at her throat. The man told her to stay quiet, grabbed the wooden box, and placed it over her head. There was a hole designed for her neck, and he locked it in place so she couldn't remove it. The moment that box was put on, any hope of rescue vanished. The box was soundproof, meaning no one could hear her cries or screams. Even if someone had been nearby, it wouldn't have helped. The couple, along with their baby and the kidnapped Colleen, made their way home. Their meticulously planned abduction had finally worked. The kidnappers were Cameron and Janice Hooker. The two met in 1973 and became a couple. At that time, Janice was just 15 years old, very naive and insecure. She was quickly manipulated by Cameron, who was 4 years older. Her insecurity suited him perfectly. He was a sadist and abused Janice for years. Emotional and physical abuse were part of her everyday life. Sometimes he tied her to a tree in the garden and beat her. On other days, he didn't lay a hand on her, but forbade her from leaving the house. Janice, who had never been in a relationship before, tried to convince herself that this was normal, that Cameron would truly love her if she just did everything he said. In 1975, they got married and soon had their first child. After that, Cameron's abuse only got worse. Out of nowhere, he said he needed something different. When the idea of kidnapping someone became more serious, Janice saw it as a chance. She thought maybe the pain would finally stop if he had a new toy, and she was right. After they kidnapped Colleen, Cameron focused all his attention on her. They brought Colleen to their house in Red Bluff, blindfolded her, and locked her in the basement. The next day, Cameron built a large wooden box, one that resembled a coffin. Inside that box, the 20-year-old Colleen was forced to spend 23 hours a day. For 1 hour each day, she was allowed to leave the box. During that time, she was given food and allowed to use the bathroom. But often, that 1 hour also included sexual assault and torture. Cameron used, among other things, a torture device similar to a stretching rack. Colleen would be strapped to a table, and her limbs were pulled apart. She endured an entire week of hell before anyone even reported her missing. That's because Colleen had been living in a shared apartment and had told a roommate she was going to California for a few days. When they didn't hear from her for several days, they contacted her parents. At first, her parents assumed that Colleen had just decided to stay a little longer in California. But after some time, they called Colleen's friend to check in. Her friend was very surprised. Because Colleen had planned the visit as a surprise, the friend didn't know she was coming and hadn't missed her at the party. She told Colleen's worried parents that Colleen had never arrived. Only then was the 20-year-old officially reported missing. The route where Colleen was kidnapped stretched over 1,000 kilometers, and police had no idea where to even start looking. And once they did begin, they found nothing. No one knew where Colleen had last been seen or what could have happened to her. Colleen remained with her captors for months, most of that time locked in the coffin-like box in the basement. Eventually, Cameron presented Colleen with a slave contract. In it, he declared that Colleen was his property and that he would kill her or her family if she ever tried to escape. Colleen agreed, out of sheer desperation, fear, and the hope of gaining even a little freedom. She signed the contract. From that point on, Cameron convinced Colleen that he had legally acquired her and that she belonged to him. He repeatedly told her about a mysterious organization called The Company. According to Cameron, this group was watching her, and if she ever tried to escape, the company would track her down and kill her, or harm her family. After signing the fake contract, Colleen was allowed to move freely around the Hooker house. She was forced to clean and take care of the household. She was still regularly abused, and when there was nothing else for her to do, she was locked back inside the box. Later in interviews, Colleen described what it was like to spend most of her days trapped in a coffin for years. At first, she cried for hours and prayed to God to help her. Over time, though, what helped her most was developing a very vivid imagination. She taught herself to mentally escape, to picture herself in a different place. "I learned to go anywhere in my imagination," she said. "You detach from reality and place yourself somewhere else, somewhere beautiful, surrounded by people you love." More than a year passed before Janice and Cameron bought a mobile home in Red Bluff. Soon after, they moved there with their child and with Colleen. The new house was smaller, and like most mobile homes, it didn't have a basement. From then on, Colleen's box was stored under Cameron and Janice's bed. While the two of them slept at night, Colleen lay just centimeters below them, locked inside her cold, unwanted wooden prison. Cameron became increasingly creative in how he tortured Colleen. He built a torture shed in the garden, filled with various instruments. There, she was sexually assaulted, whipped, and physically tormented. Months passed. Janice became pregnant again, and a few months later, she gave birth to their second child. Then on Christmas Eve 1980, Cameron gave Colleen a gift, a phone call to her family. But he made one thing very clear. If she said anything about him on the kidnapping, her entire family would be murdered. Colleen recalled, "During the whole call, Cameron stood right next to me and listened in. Colleen's family was overjoyed to hear from her, but of course they had questions. At some point, Cameron got annoyed by all the questions and hung up the phone. But in March 1981, he actually allowed Colleen to briefly visit her family. Cameron planned everything, including what Colleen was and wasn't allowed to say. During the car ride, he told her to say that the two of them were engaged and that she was very happy. Colleen was allowed to go to the visit on her own. She repeated the story Cameron had made her memorize, but her family found it hard to believe. Colleen looked fragile and sick, almost unrecognizable. Still, they tried to share in her happiness as best they could. When Cameron came to pick her up, Colleen's father even took a photo of the two of them together. You're seeing that photo now. It's an unbelievably bizarre moment. To the father, it was just a photo of his daughter and her fiancé. But for us who know the real story, it's anything but normal. Back in Red Bluff, Cameron began showing more affection to Colleen, while becoming more distant with Janice. It reminded Janice of the way things used to be, before Colleen entered their lives, and Cameron abused her daily. She became jealous of Colleen and wanted to be the woman Cameron loved again. At the same time, though, Cameron was building a prison in the backyard, planning to kidnap and imprison even more women. Shortly after, he even allowed Colleen to take a job as a hotel cleaner. Years passed, and everything seemed to be going according to Cameron's plan, as if he was getting everything he wanted. But by 1984, the relationship between Janice and Colleen had changed. They had become friends, and they talked a lot. Over time, Janice began to realize something. Not only was Colleen being controlled by Cameron, she was too. She had been abused, manipulated, and lied to for years. Her guilt about helping kidnap Colleen kept growing. In her desperation, Janice sought advice from a local pastor. She told the story, though slightly altered to hide her own involvement. She described it as a kind of love triangle and made the situation sound less serious. Still, the pastor condemned Cameron's actions, calling it sin, including the supposed polygamy. Janice, who was deeply religious, took this as a final sign. She couldn't live this way anymore. On August 9, 1984, while Colleen was working at the hotel, Janice sat her down and told her everything. She explained that the contract Colleen had signed was completely fake. And more importantly, the mysterious company Cameron always talked about, it didn't exist. Janice told Colleen the truth. Everything was a lie, made up by Cameron to control her with fear and keep her from escaping. Colleen was genuinely shocked. She had believed every one of Cameron's lies. She was happy, of course, but also completely overwhelmed. So much so that she first called Cameron and told him she now knew the truth, and that she was leaving. After that, she fled by bus back to her family in Oregon, and told them everything that had been done to her over the past years. At the same time, Janice went to the police and reported her husband's crimes. The police then contacted Colleen, who confirmed everything Janice had said. On August 22, 1984, Cameron Hooker was arrested. During his arrest, he appeared emotionless. Shortly before that, he had told Janice to destroy all the evidence in the house, and she obeyed one last time. But she forgot one photograph. The photo showed the contract between Cameron and Colleen, and included Colleen's signature. The picture also showed details about the supposed company. In court, Janice ultimately testified against Cameron and received full immunity in return. She said Cameron had brainwashed her. In November 1984, Cameron Hooker was sentenced to 104 years in prison. He was expected to spend the rest of his life behind bars. However, just in the last years, he became eligible to apply for parole. As of now, it's still unclear whether that will be approved, but it's considered highly unlikely. Colleen's case received widespread media coverage. Psychiatrist Borwin Bandelow wrote a book about it, and a film titled Girl in the Box was produced. Colleen herself gave several interviews. Today, she works as an accountant, has 2 children and a grandchild. She advocates for women affected by violence and continues to raise awareness, especially about the dangers of hitchhiking, no matter how kind or trustworthy someone may seem. And that brings us to the end of today's video, a truly shocking crime. I honestly can't, and don't want to, imagine how hard it must have been to live for years in a small wooden box, not knowing if you'd ever be free again. Thankfully, Colleen survived this horrific ordeal and is now living a normal life. I truly admire this woman, someone who has gone through such extreme trauma and still manages not only to live a stable life, but also to fight for others who have experienced violence. That's nothing short of inspiring. If you liked the video, feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscribe. With just a few clicks and keystrokes, you help support this channel tremendously. Thanks in advance. Here you can find the next chilling case. Until then, see you soon, stay safe.